They laughed at her like she didn't belong. On a quiet Monday morning, Sarah walked her son to school, just like she did every day. She wore a simple dress, her hair loosely tied back, and a calm smile that came from years of putting her family first. To her, it was just another drop-off. But to the parents watching from their luxury cars, dressed in designer outfits and whispering behind perfectly manicured nails, she was a target. They saw a woman who didn't fit their world, a world of wealth, image, and silent competition. "She probably works at a diner," one of them giggled. Another glanced at Sarah's worn-out shoes and smirked. The judgment was quiet but sharp, the kind that cuts deep, even when it's hidden behind polite smiles. But Sarah wasn't angry. She had faced worse. Life had taught her how to stay still when the world tried to shake her. What those mothers didn't know was that Sarah's life was far from ordinary, and her story far from simple. Because just as the final bell rang and kids began spilling out into the courtyard, a sound thundered through the sky. Everyone looked up. A sleek black helicopter circled once before gently landing in the school's open field. Dust swirled, gasps echoed, and the whispers stopped. Out stepped a man in a tailored suit, tall, calm, and focused, walking straight towards Sarah. The same women who had been mocking her minutes earlier were now frozen, their eyes wide, unsure of what they were seeing. And as Sarah took a step forward, smiling softly, the entire school realized they had made a very big mistake. But this was just the beginning. The man who stepped out of the helicopter was James, Sarah's husband. To most people at that school, he was a complete stranger. But in the world of global business, he was a name that carried weight. Private meetings with world leaders, quiet donations that saved hospitals, deals made behind boardroom doors. James kept a low profile, not out of secrecy, but because he never needed to prove anything to anyone. Back home, though, he was just Dad, the kind who helped with science projects and read bedtime stories. He and Sarah had always lived simply by choice. They believed in raising their son with values, not vanity. Their wealth was never on display. No flashy cars, no designer labels, just a quiet life rooted in love and trust. But that day at school, everything changed. James walked across the field like he belonged there, because he did. The same women who had laughed at Sarah now fidgeted nervously, unsure whether to speak or stay silent. Their curiosity burned. Who was this man? Why would someone like him be with someone like her? What they didn't know was the long road Sarah and James had walked together. The sacrifices, the setbacks, the nights when all they had was each other and hope. Before success, there had been struggle. And Sarah, the simple mother they looked down on, had been James's rock through all of it. But Sarah didn't come to the school to prove anything. She came to be a mother. It was the others who had turned it into a silent battlefield of pride and assumptions. And as James reached out to hold her hand, their son came running into their arms, the helicopter still humming in the background, while everyone else just watched in stunned silence. But the real reason behind that visit hadn't been revealed yet. Whispers turned into murmurs. A few mothers exchanged looks, trying to pretend they weren't staring, but everyone was. Sarah noticed. She always did, but she kept her focus on her son, brushing the hair from his forehead and smiling like nothing had changed. But everything had. That helicopter landing wasn't just a visit. It was the beginning of something none of them could have predicted. Later that afternoon, in the school's parent council meeting, the tension boiled beneath the surface. The same women who'd rolled their eyes at Sarah earlier now tried to act friendly. One of them, Amanda, always the loudest voice in the room, smiled too wide and asked Sarah where she got her dress. It wasn't a compliment, it was a test, a reminder of how this world operated: appearances, control, unspoken rules. Sarah had never been interested in those games, but now, without trying, she was at the center of them. Behind the scenes, a silent storm was brewing. James hadn't just dropped in for a sweet surprise. The school, an elite private academy known for its exclusivity, was being considered for a quiet, major donation, one that could change its future. What no one knew was that James had once been turned away from that same school as a child, simply because his parents couldn't afford the fees. He hadn't forgotten. Sarah had begged him to keep things simple. "Let our son be a kid. Don't turn this into a show," she'd said the night before. But James had his reasons. And somewhere deep inside, Sarah feared this wasn't just about charity or closure. It was about something unresolved, something personal. And as the next school day began, with rumors already circling, the question on everyone's mind was the same. Why had he really come? By the end of the week, the entire school was buzzing. Parents whispered in the parking lot. Teachers tried to act neutral, but their glances lingered just a second too long. Even the principal, Mr. Coleman, had suddenly become very attentive, sending emails about transparency and welcoming all families equally, words that hadn't seemed to matter before. Sarah kept her usual routine, walking her son to class, offering a gentle nod to those who now smiled at her, pretending the past few days hadn't happened. But she could feel the change, not just in how they looked at her, but in how they feared her now. It wasn't respect, it was uncertainty, and that was worse. At home, things were tense. James was on phone calls late into the night. He was speaking in hushed tones, using words like board approval, leverage, and conditions. Sarah didn't like it. This wasn't supposed to be a power play. Their son loved the school, not for its name, but for his friends, his teachers, the little routine he had built. But James, he hadn't let go of the past. That weekend, an invitation arrived. A special parent-only evening, hosted by the school board, suddenly added to the calendar. To discuss the future direction of the academy, the email said. No one said it out loud, but everyone knew this was about them. Sarah didn't want to go, but James insisted. When they arrived that evening, stepping into the grand hall filled with the same polished parents who once looked through her, all eyes turned. The room fell quiet. Even Amanda, always quick to speak, paused mid-sentence when she saw them. And as Mr. Coleman walked to the microphone, clearing his throat nervously, Sarah gripped James's hand just a little tighter. Something big was coming. Mr. Coleman adjusted the mic, his voice shaky despite the rehearsed smile. Tonight, we want to thank all the families who continue to support our school, and especially one family whose generous contribution could transform our programs for years to come. Everyone turned toward James and Sarah. But before anyone could speak, another voice echoed from the back of the room. Is it true? It was a man in a dark blazer stepping forward. Parents shifted uncomfortably. Is it true that this donation comes with conditions? A hush swept the room. Mr. Coleman's smile cracked. Let's keep this evening respectful. But the man pressed on, because if someone's trying to asterisk by asterisk their way into the board, into decisions about our kids, we deserve to know. Sarah's heart dropped. She looked at James, calm on the outside. She could see it in his eyes. He hadn't told her everything. It wasn't just a donation. James had made a proposal, one that would give him a seat on the school's advisory board, not for power, for oversight, for change. He'd seen how this school treated people who didn't fit their mold, and he was tired of watching quietly from the outside. The room was restless now. People whispered, not just about Sarah anymore, but about control, money, status. The very things they had once used against her were now being threatened by her. And then came the second twist. Amanda, standing near the refreshments table, crossed her arms and spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. She's not who you think she is. I know Sarah. We went to school together. And trust me, she's hiding something too. Gasps. Sarah froze. Eyes that had once ignored her were now watching, waiting, judging, again. But this time, it wasn't just about who she was. It was about what she was hiding. And in that moment, the room wasn't just full of tension. It was about to explode. The room turned ice cold. All eyes snapped to Amanda, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade. Sarah didn't move. Her fingers tensed around the glass in her hand, but her expression stayed calm, unreadable. James looked at her, confused for the first time that evening. Amanda stepped forward, her heels clicking against the polished floor. Back in college, Sarah wasn't some sweet, quiet girl. She was ambitious, ruthless, even. She knew exactly how to get what she wanted, and she got it. She turned to the crowd. Don't let her plain looks fool you. This whole act, it's not new. Whispers erupted. The same crowd that had once dismissed Sarah was now hungry for drama. But Sarah didn't flinch. She stepped forward, finally breaking the silence. Her voice was calm but steady. Amanda is right about one thing. I haven't always been this version of myself. Life wasn't always kind. I did fight for what I wanted, and I made mistakes. But that doesn't make me a fraud. That makes me human. She looked around the room, holding their eyes. I chose a quiet life, not because I couldn't have more, but because I finally understood what mattered. Kindness, family, truth, things money can't fake. A long pause. Then, to everyone's shock, Mr. Coleman cleared his throat again and held up a file. For what it's worth, he said, we did our due diligence. The proposed donation includes zero influence over admissions, curriculum, or policy. Just a wish to fund a scholarship program under the name of Sarah's late mother. Gasps again, but this time different. Amanda's face fell. Sarah blinked back the tears. That name hadn't been spoken in public in years. James reached for her hand, and this time she didn't pull away. Just when the room began to settle, a secretary rushed in, whispering something to Mr. Coleman. His face went pale. There's been a mistake, he said slowly. The board, they just received another offer. A matching donation, but anonymous. And it comes with one condition. Sarah must decline. Sarah's breath caught. The game wasn't over. Someone else was still playing. For a long moment, no one moved. The room hung in silence, suspended between power and principle. Sarah stood at the center of it all, the woman they once mocked now facing a decision bigger than any of them had expected. She could have had recognition, a scholarship in her mother's name, and finally, a voice in the place that once shut her out. But someone who knew her and feared her quiet strength, was trying to take that away without even showing their face. Sarah looked at Mr. Coleman, then at James, and finally at her son, who stood just outside the hall with wide, curious eyes. That was all the clarity she needed. She stepped forward and spoke with quiet conviction. Tell the board I'm withdrawing our donation. If someone else wants to help the school, that's wonderful. But I won't play games with my mother's name. Her kindness wasn't meant to be a bargaining chip. Mr. Coleman hesitated, then nodded. A few parents lowered their heads. Some even clapped softly, as if unsure how to respond to something that wasn't about money, but dignity. Later that night, Sarah and James walked home together in the cool air. He wrapped his arm around her shoulder. I should have told you everything, he said. I just wanted to fix what the world once broke. You did, she whispered. You just didn't need a helicopter to do it. The next day, the elite parents still whispered, but the tone had shifted. There was something different in their eyes now. Not pity, not envy, but respect. Sarah didn't need to be loud to make an impact. She didn't need titles or applause. All she needed was what she'd always had: grace, truth, and the quiet strength to walk through judgment and still choose kindness. And that was more powerful than any landing.